I guarantee you, 100%, there's a group of people listening to this right now saying, oh, Andreessen's a shill, Rogan's shilling for flock, this is what they're doing, they're trying to get the mass surveillance. This idea that it's easy to become a billionaire and that these billionaires somehow or another are the problem because they're not paying their fair share is so weird that's a narrative that actually gets pushed through.
Rogan just spent nearly 3 hours talking up surveillance drone tech to the same crowd that tunes in to hear his takes, and he did not exactly make it subtle. That is the headline many listeners walked away with after the Mark Andreessen episode. A billionaire stepped into the spotlight, promoted a company tied to his own interests, and the conversation rolled forward with very little pushback. The whole exchange felt less like a tough interview and more like a polished promo segment that somehow skipped the usual disclosure talk. At this stage, the latest version of the show almost feels predictable. Tech billionaires keep getting the superstar treatment, complete with a glowing spotlight and smooth coverage. Ideas that would normally spark serious debate get framed as helpful solutions instead. What some people see as large-scale surveillance is presented as a public benefit, and that contrast has plenty of viewers raising their eyebrows and asking questions.
We were just talking about this wild crime spree that happened this weekend in Austin. So it seems like was it teenagers that were doing this?
Yeah.
Yeah? You're not on the microphone there, fella.
15 and 17 years
15 and 17 years old.
That's terrible.
What was the purpose? Just going crazy?
I think so, yeah. They stole cars and stole guns and switched cars.
And they shot at like 10 different locations.
At least one person's in critical condition.
Yeah.
They shot multiple people. They had flock cameras in Austin, but then they shut those cameras off for political reasons.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
So please explain that.
Yeah. So these guys are driving around in cars, and they're switching cars, whatever. These guys running around. So there's a system called Flock, which is one of our companies, and what they do is kind of like in the movies. You take all the municipal cameras and traffic cameras and everything, and you feed them into an AI, and the AI is able to first find a license plate. And so this thing is deployed. It's sold to city governments. It's used all over the country. It solves crimes every day. We get reports on carjackings with kids in the back seat, and their lives get saved because they track them down. So a lot of towns and cities have this, and they love it. In cities like Austin, with the intense politics, they run into backlash on privacy and surveillance concerns. And so Austin had Flock and then turned it off. Late breaking news today is these guys drove into some adjacent town, up against Austin, and Flock was live in that town, and so Flock tagged them the minute they drove into that town, and then they caught the guys. Subsequent to that, the mayor, your mayor in Austin, your mayor and your chief of police gave a press conference and said, "We really need to rethink this because it's crazy to have the ability to solve crimes and stop crimes."
Anyone who questions either of them seems to get painted as uninformed, negative, or just bitter. That has become the vibe many viewers are picking up on lately. And for some people, it is getting tougher to sit through episode after episode without noticing it. If you missed it, Joe spent the closing part of that same episode trying to ease tensions around the whole Theo Von situation. That controversy is big enough to deserve its own deep dive because there are so many layers and competing opinions involved. There is simply too much going on beneath the surface to break down in a few quick minutes. But even before getting into that drama, people online were already reacting strongly to what they saw as an incredibly tone-deaf episode from the start. What made it stand out even more was that it came after weeks of Joe pushing back whenever Theo Von tried to raise concerns about billionaires influencing politics, AI-powered surveillance, tech companies collecting personal data, or powerful individuals shaping major parts of society behind the scenes. Those conversations had already sparked debate, making this episode feel even more controversial to many viewers.
Make more money than everybody else, right? You could do that too. It's like this is one of the things that America is really good at. You really can just work 20 hours a day and achieve something spectacular. Yeah. This is a narrative that gets pushed along democratic socialists, that no one achieves substantial wealth without somehow or another victimizing other people.
Yeah. And then Jeff Bezos is the obvious counterexample, which is like every time you do the one click and the thing gets delivered to you 2 hours later at the cheapest possible price, saving you and your family a lot of time and money.
These Amazon warehouse guys are like fucking dying in the warehouse.
Are they?
Well, I mean, they talk about these work conditions that are sometimes deplorable, right? And then you have the people at the top with like hundreds of billions of dollars.
Spread it around.
Spread it around a little bit, yeah.
Spread it around.
Seems like
probably
you could.
Better for everybody if you spread it around. Maybe people wouldn't hate you as much.
Joe's next move caught a lot of people off guard. After all the debate surrounding Theo Von's concerns, he ended up bringing on the exact type of billionaire that critics felt those warnings were aimed at in the first place. That decision immediately got people talking and sparked another wave of reactions online. What really grabbed attention was how direct the conversation felt from the start. Joe did not spend much time easing into the topic before he and Mark Andreessen began discussing the idea of using AI-powered surveillance drones to help address crime in Austin. The subject came up almost immediately, making it one of the central talking points of the episode right out of the gate. Then came the detail that had critics sounding the alarm bells. The technology being discussed was tied to a company connected to Mark Andreessen through his investment interests. That connection instantly fueled more debate and skepticism online. For anyone unfamiliar with Andreessen, he first rose to prominence as a co-creator of Netscape, one of the pioneering web browsers from the early days of the internet during the 1990s. After a massive financial success earlier in his career, Mark Andreessen went on to co-found Andreessen Horowitz, a venture capital giant that has become one of the most influential firms in the technology industry. The firm manages more than $100 billion in assets and has investments connected to major names across tech, including Meta, Coinbase, AI companies, crypto ventures, and many other high-profile businesses shaping the market today. Mark himself has accumulated a fortune worth billions, making him one of the most recognizable figures in the investment world. One company linked to his investment portfolio is Flock Safety, a business that became a major topic of discussion during the episode. Flock Safety develops technology that combines AI-powered monitoring systems with tools such as traffic cameras, license plate readers, drones, and other data collection methods to help track vehicle movements and activity in real time across communities throughout the United States.
So the concern is mass surveillance, right? And the concern is that someone's going to abuse this and use AI for nefarious purposes, right? Like what nefarious purposes would that be?
Yeah, so this is a system that could be used in bad ways. So if you had a corrupt, chief of police and, he had some personal entanglement thing and he wanted to track a, X whatever, or if you, the mayor, wanted to, do this to terrorize your political opponents or whatever.
Is there a blockchain for Flock so you could know who's doing what and how it's happening so someone couldn't abuse it? Is it possible to circumvent that?
Yeah, it could, but this is like the standard. Yes, and this, they log everything, and I'm sure there's records of everything. But look, it's like anything else. It's why cops have to get a warrant before they search somebody's house, right?
Right.
There's always the question of like, what is the legal authority, and what are the safeguards that protect this?
The technology is already being introduced in multiple locations across the country, which is one reason the discussion sparked such a strong reaction. For supporters, it is a tool that could help law enforcement respond more effectively. For critics, it raises serious questions about privacy, oversight, and how much monitoring people are comfortable with in everyday life. What really caught viewers' attention was the timing of the conversation. A recent crime spree had been making headlines, and then Mark Andreessen appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast discussing how technology connected to public safety could help reduce crime. That sequence of events led some people online to speculate about whether the appearance was intended to capitalize on a topic that was already dominating public attention. Those suspicions only grew as the episode continued. Critics argued that Joe offered very little resistance or scrutiny, while Andreessen discussed technology linked to his investment interests. To those viewers, it felt less like a challenging interview and more like a high-profile platform that gave a billionaire the chance to present his perspective to millions of listeners without much pushback.
There's an older system that's deployed in many cities called ShotSpotter.
What's it called?
It's called ShotSpotter.
ShotSpotter?
ShotSpotter.
ShotSpotter. Oh, ShotSpotter. Like spot someone shooting.
Spot somebody shooting. So ShotSpotter is an older system that works very well. It's deployed in many cities. And what it is, totally different system. What it is they put these precision microphones on top of rooftops all over the city. And then when a gunshot goes off, they're able to instantly triangulate that a gunshot has gone off and specifically where the gunshot went off. Chicago got so wrapped up on these political issues that they also, not only did they not have Flock, they also turned off their ShotSpotter system voluntarily. And so people now get shot in Chicago and they bleed out on the street and nobody knows and nobody cares.
And what is the argument that they make?
That it is civil libertarian argument, which is all around surveillance and abuse and control and all these things. And like I say, I think that's a very legitimate argument. And then I would say there's like the woke argument, right? Which is that the argument goes the American criminal justice system is clearly biased. That those will disproportionately affect disadvantaged people in society and disadvantaged groups, and so therefore they.
That dynamic is exactly what frustrated so many viewers. the reaction was even stronger because Rogan has already faced plenty of criticism over the past year for frequently giving favorable platforms to billionaires, politicians, and influential figures from the tech world. Because of that history, many people were already watching this episode with a skeptical eye. What made the debate even louder was the guest choice itself. Out of countless possible guests, Rogan brought on a billionaire with connections to AI-driven surveillance technology. Critics argue that the opening portion of the conversation gave significant attention to the benefits of large-scale monitoring systems, while leaving many of the concerns about privacy, oversight, and potential misuse largely unexplored.
Chicago organizers managed to rid the city of ShotSpotter. Controversial police surveillance tech is often inaccurate, according to research that allowed activists to launch a fact-based campaign and a political model for organizers in other cities. Aha! So they're saying it's inaccurate. 88.72% of incidents flagged by ShotSpotter ended with police finding no incidents of gun crime. Okay.
But think about
right.
But that doesn't mean the gunshots didn't go off.
Exactly. That doesn't mean anything. Rarely produce evidence of a gun-related crime. That also doesn't mean anything because it just shows that a gun...
Whenever Joe briefly touched on concerns about privacy or the possibility of power being misused, many viewers felt that Mark quickly minimized those issues and shifted the conversation back toward the potential benefits of the technology. That approach became another major point of debate among people watching the episode. What stood out to critics was that Joe offered very little resistance during those moments. Instead of pressing harder on the concerns being raised, he often appeared to move past them, which left some viewers asking, "Are you actually serious right now?" The lack of tougher questioning became a story of its own and fueled even more discussion online. For many people, the concern is not simply about a single bad actor accessing information for personal reasons. The bigger fear centers on how large amounts of personal data can be collected over time, stored indefinitely, linked together across different systems, and potentially used in ways that were never originally intended. That broader concern about privacy, oversight, and long-term consequences is what keeps this debate so heated and controversial. That is the part that genuinely worries a lot of people. The debate is often less about one specific piece of technology and more about the growing amount of personal information that already exists in digital form. What makes it even more surprising is that many people share huge amounts of data every day without thinking much about it. Just consider how much information can already be connected to an average person. Phone location data, text records, dash cams, traffic cameras, social media activity, search history, online purchases, private messages, home security systems, and countless app permissions that get accepted with a quick tap. Together, those sources can create a detailed digital trail of daily life. In many cases, certain types of information can also be requested through legal processes and introduced as evidence in court when authorities have the proper authorization.
New York, and so New York has their own version of this now with their new mayor, and the big controversy there last week was their mayor did a video standing in front of somebody's home.
Yes.
Calling him out by name.
Ken Griffin.
Ken Griffin.
Who's a very wealthy guy who brings a lot of jobs to New York City and was in the middle of a huge project. That's a $6 billion project, and now he's considering tanking it.
It's Ken, who I know. Ken is a major philanthropist. Ken has donated hundreds of millions of dollars, particularly to healthcare in New York City, on top of being a major taxpayer and source of tax revenue, on top of being a major employer. And so the new mayor has deliberately targeted him personally to try to force him out.
Why?
Yeah.
The top 1% of New York, aren't they responsible for 50% of the tax base?
Yeah, on that order, yeah.
Something in the range
also
of
roughly
40,
the case in California in the year 2000, 1,000 individuals were 50% of the tax revenue. It was the all-time peak, but I think it's roughly 1% of the taxpayers, so 50%.
Now imagine adding AI-powered drones operating across cities, along with even more sophisticated monitoring systems gathering information around the clock. For critics, that possibility raises an entirely new set of questions about privacy, accountability, and how much data should be collected in the first place. That is why some viewers reacted so strongly when a billionaire with financial ties to the technology argued that safeguards were in place to protect the data. When explanations focused on things like access logs and internal tracking systems, many skeptical listeners were not convinced. Online reactions came fast, with critics mocking the discussion and arguing that the episode sounded less like a tough conversation and more like a pitch for surveillance technology aimed directly at Rogan's audience. As a result, accusations that Rogan had become a sellout started circulating again across social media and comment sections. Another source of frustration was that the conversation often drifted into familiar culture. War debates instead of staying focused on the broader issue many viewers wanted addressed. how corporations collect, monetize, and profit from massive amounts of user data on an enormous scale. Many viewers argued that this is the conversation that deserves the most attention on a platform with such a massive audience. For years, major corporations have built highly profitable businesses around collecting user information, analyzing behavior, tracking engagement patterns, and turning that data into valuable commercial products. Social media platforms, advertising networks, and tech companies all play a role in that ecosystem, making it a topic with enormous real-world impact. Critics of the episode felt that parts of the discussion drifted toward debates about racial profiling, camera bias, and other culture war flashpoints, while giving far less attention to the broader issue of how large corporations gather, use, and profit from personal data on a massive scale. To those viewers, that missed opportunity was one of the most frustrating aspects of the entire conversation.
I mean, I'm not a businessman, although I kind of am.
You are.
I kind of am in some weird way. I've become a businessman.
Yeah.
But this idea that it's easy to become a billionaire and that these billionaires somehow or another are the problem because they're not paying their fair share is so weird that's a narrative that actually gets pushed through. Yeah, they make more money than everybody else. Right. You could do that too. It's like this is one of the things that America is really good at. Like this is a narrative that gets pushed along democratic socialists that no one achieves substantial wealth without somehow or another victimizing other people.
Yeah. And then Jeff Bezos is the obvious counterexample, which is like every time you do the one click and the thing gets delivered to you 2 hours later at the cheapest possible price, saving you and your family a lot of time and money.
But at the expense of small mom and pop stores, allegedly.
Although a lot of them sell on Amazon, a lot of small businesses sell on Amazon. Many European countries have a much more draconian, are much even more hostile to business, and the result is they are much poorer. Their slower growth are actually shrinking.
And that is before even getting into the separate debate around AI systems gathering information from across the internet to train models. That topic alone could fill an entire episode because it raises questions about data ownership, consent, transparency, and how information is being used behind the scenes. For many viewers, the broader impression left by the episode was that Rogan no longer seems willing or able to challenge powerful tech billionaires with the same intensity he once brought to controversial guests. Later in the discussion, another moment sparked a strong reaction online. Joe defended billionaires and suggested that some criticism directed at extremely wealthy people comes from individuals who are resentful or unwilling to put in the work required to succeed. That argument did not sit well with many viewers. Whether someone supports billionaires or opposes them, critics pointed out that debates about wealth concentration, corporate influence, lobbying, and political power exist for reasons far more complicated than simple jealousy. Then came a section that had many people shaking their heads. At one point, Jamie pulled up statistics related to the effectiveness of certain surveillance technologies. According to critics of the episode, once the data appeared less favorable than expected, Joe seemed more focused on defending Mark's position than digging deeper into the results. That moment quickly became another flashpoint, with viewers arguing that the conversation lacked the skepticism and scrutiny they had hoped to see. Critics online were quick to call it an example of confirmation bias. Some viewers even questioned why fact-checking segments matter if the information is later interpreted in a way that appears to favor the guest's position, regardless of what the numbers show. That criticism gained momentum after a statistic was discussed suggesting that a large percentage of certain alerts generated by gunshot detection systems did not lead to police confirming a gun-related crime when they arrived on the scene. Rather than treating that statistic as evidence that the technology might be less effective than advertised, Joe responded by pointing out that the lack of a confirmed crime does not necessarily prove that no gunshot occurred. That response became another major point of debate online. Supporters argued it was a reasonable observation, while critics felt it avoided the larger questions surrounding the reliability of the system. After all, the selling point of these technologies is often their accuracy, effectiveness, and ability to provide useful information in real-world situations. If officers repeatedly respond to alerts that do not lead to confirmed incidents, many people believe it is fair to ask tough questions about performance, costs, and whether widespread expansion makes sense. Critics of the episode felt that those questions never received enough attention, and that the discussion repeatedly returned to trusting the assurances of those connected to the technology rather than fully examining the concerns being raised. That shift in tone is what frustrated so many viewers as the episode went on. For critics, the conversation gradually stopped feeling like a tough, balanced exchange where claims were being challenged from multiple angles. Instead, it began to feel more like a carefully managed media appearance, with a billionaire being given a smooth platform to present his views in front of millions of listeners without facing the level of scrutiny some audience members expected.
It's so weird when you think about what happens on the corporate level, that there's these corporations that make like hundreds of billions of dollars, and they're like, yeah, they didn't pay tax on this because they're this corporation, and then not pay tax on it. And you're like,
Well, supposedly that's what Jeffrey Epstein did for people. He
Found those tax
he helped
loopholes?
people with tax loopholes and
it exists for a reason, right?
scumbags.
Yeah.
They've all put it in place. And then there's that thing where like no one should be a billionaire. Well, okay, hang on. Do you like having a fucking iPhone?
Yeah.
Somebody had to make that. They're working 16 hours a day. You don't want to be Tim Cook. You don't want to be Steve Jobs. Guy died young because of it.
But I guess the argument that some people make against that is not that that guy shouldn't be wealthy. It's that when they have this overabundance of wealth, and that the people that also work there, like these Amazon warehouse guys, are like fucking dying in the warehouse. Like,
Are they?
Well, I mean, they talk about these work conditions that are sometimes deplorable, right? And then you have the people at the top with like hundreds of billions of dollars.
The moment Mark Andreessen began discussing the idea that billionaires face unfair criticism from the public, Joe Rogan quickly moved to defend them, and that instantly became another flashpoint for viewers. Critics of the episode felt that Joe framed many ultra-wealthy figures primarily as hardworking entrepreneurs and job creators, which sparked a wave of disagreement online. The conversation became even more controversial when hedge fund billionaire Ken Griffin was brought up as an example. That is where many critics felt the argument started to break down. They pointed out that hedge funds operate very differently from companies that manufacture products, build large facilities, or employ huge workforces. Instead, hedge funds generally focus on investing capital, trading financial assets, managing risk, and generating returns for investors through a variety of market strategies. For many viewers, the issue was not whether capitalism works or whether successful people deserve credit for their achievements. The frustration came from what they saw as an overly simplified portrayal of billionaire influence and economic impact. Critics argued that discussions about wealth concentration, financial power, and corporate influence are far more complex than simply labeling wealthy individuals as either heroes or villains. That is why this part of the episode generated such a strong reaction and kept the debate going long after the show ended. People online grew increasingly frustrated because they felt Mark and Joe were reducing a highly complicated issue into a handful of selective statistics and easy-to-repeat talking points, while leaving out much of the larger context driving public concern. For those critics, the discussion seemed to focus on narrow examples instead of addressing the broader economic questions sitting underneath the debate. Many viewers argued that concerns about wealth concentration and corporate power are not fringe ideas or obscure internet theories anymore. A lot of people see these issues through their own experiences every day. They look at rising housing costs, increasing expenses, stagnant wages in some industries, and the growing gap between top earners and everyone else. At the same time, they see major corporations reporting enormous profits, which naturally fuels questions about whether the economic system is benefiting everyone equally. The conversation became even more controversial when Mark praised the overall economic outcomes produced by the United States, and critics felt Joe accepted those claims with very little pushback. That sparked another wave of debate online. Some viewers pointed to measures such as wealth inequality, healthcare costs, and economic mobility, arguing that the United States faces serious challenges compared with other developed nations. Others disagreed and highlighted areas where the American economy performs strongly. The result was yet another heated discussion that left many listeners feeling the episode had glossed over important complexities instead of digging into them. Critics pointed to economic data showing that wealth gaps have expanded over time, which is why many viewers questioned some of the claims being made during the episode. From their perspective, there was a clear disconnect between glowing descriptions of the current economic system and the financial pressures that many people deal with every day. Rising housing costs, expensive healthcare, growing debt burdens, and concerns about wage growth were all issues that viewers said deserved more attention in the discussion. Because of that, some audience members found it difficult to relate to a conversation in which a billionaire venture capitalist praised the strengths of the existing system without spending much time on its shortcomings. It is not surprising that those comments generated pushback and sparked another round of heated debate online. What made the situation even more interesting for longtime listeners is that this was not the first time Joe had faced disagreement on the topic of wealth and economic power. Just a few months earlier, comedian Tom Segura challenged some of Joe's views during a discussion about wealth inequality and corporations earning massive profits. That exchange stood out to many fans because it showed a rare moment of direct pushback on an issue that continues to divide audiences and keep conversations going long after the microphones are turned off. People online were joking that if Tom Segura was sounding more grounded on economic issues than Joe Rogan, then something must have changed dramatically. For years, many fans saw Joe as someone willing to question powerful figures, challenge mainstream narratives, and approach authority with a healthy dose of skepticism. Critics of this episode argued that those instincts seem to fade whenever certain high-profile billionaires or influential tech leaders are sitting across from him. What made the comparison even more striking for viewers was that Joe had appeared more receptive to Tom Segura's arguments during an earlier discussion about wealth inequality. At the time, he seemed willing to consider the idea that broader economic gains and a more balanced distribution of wealth could benefit society. Then, according to critics, Mark Andreessen arrived with a very different perspective, and Joe appeared to shift his position surprisingly quickly. That contrast became another major talking point across social media and podcast discussions. The debate intensified even further when Joe suggested that becoming a billionaire is largely a matter of working hard and putting in extraordinary effort. That moment spread rapidly online and triggered a flood of reactions. Critics argued that the statement oversimplified a complex mix of factors that can influence financial success, including opportunity, timing, access to resources, market conditions, and luck. As a result, the clip became one of the most heavily discussed moments from the entire episode and kept fueling arguments long after it aired. The idea that someone can simply work extreme hours and eventually become a billionaire struck many viewers as disconnected from the reality most people experience. Critics pointed out that some of the hardest working people in society are often warehouse employees, truck drivers, delivery drivers, nurses, construction workers, factory workers, restaurant staff, and countless others who regularly put in long shifts, overtime hours, and physically demanding work. Yet despite that effort, many still struggle with rising costs and paycheck-to-paycheck living. That is why some listeners pushed back against the suggestion that extraordinary wealth is mainly the result of working harder than everyone else. In their view, financial success on the scale of billions of dollars usually involves a combination of factors, including timing, access to opportunities, successful business ventures, market conditions, investment growth, and sometimes a significant amount of luck. Critics also argued that Mark Andreessen's story reflects how capital can generate additional wealth over time. After achieving major success through a technology company and later investing in other growing businesses, the value of those assets increased substantially. Many viewers highlighted the difference between earning income through hourly labor and building wealth through ownership of companies, investments, or appreciating assets. To them, that distinction is central to understanding why economic mobility and wealth accumulation remain such heavily debated topics, especially when discussions involve billionaires and the broader economy. Critics of the episode were careful to point out that their concerns were not necessarily about success, entrepreneurship, or wealth itself. Most people recognize that innovation, business growth, and risk-taking can create jobs, products, and opportunities that benefit society. The frustration comes when discussions appear to portray billionaires as beyond criticism, or suggest that every concern about wealth concentration, corporate power, or political influence is simply the result of bitterness or envy. For many viewers, that framing felt far too simplistic for such a complicated issue. What made the reaction even stronger is Joe Rogan's history and the image many longtime fans associate with him. For years, he built a reputation as someone who was relatable, skeptical of authority, willing to question mainstream narratives, and eager to challenge powerful people, regardless of their status. That reputation is a big reason why some older listeners say these newer episodes feel so different from the version of Rogan they remember. According to critics, the change is not that Joe interviews billionaires, investors, or influential figures. Most major podcasts regularly host wealthy and powerful guests. The issue, in their view, is the perceived lack of tough questioning compared with earlier years. Instead of aggressively testing claims, challenging assumptions, and digging into uncomfortable topics, some viewers feel the conversations now involve more agreement and less scrutiny. That shift in tone is what many longtime listeners point to when they say Rogan feels different today, and it remains one of the biggest reasons these episodes continue to spark such intense debate online. Many longtime viewers argue that Joe Rogan's approach has changed significantly over the years. In the past, he was known for challenging authority figures, debating guests, questioning accepted narratives, and and showing deep skepticism toward powerful institutions. Critics now say he appears far more comfortable around billionaires, major investors, and influential tech leaders, leading some to claim he has moved away from the perspective that originally attracted so many everyday listeners. For those critics, the larger story is not just about Mark Andreessen's appearance on the podcast. It is about what can happen when a platform that built its identity around questioning power gradually shifts toward amplifying the voices of people who already hold enormous influence. They argue that the transformation was not sudden or tied to a single episode. Instead, they see it as a slow evolution that unfolded over many years. One guest at a time, one conversation at a time, and one subtle shift at a time, the tone of the show changed. By the time some longtime fans fully recognized the difference, they felt the podcast had become something fundamentally different from what they remembered. Same microphone, same host, and the same audience returning every week, but a very different style of conversation. Now, what many critics are really arguing is that, while the surface of the show may look the same, the conversations underneath feel completely different now. That perception is what keeps fueling debate among longtime listeners and newer viewers alike. Some believe Rogan could eventually return to the more skeptical, challenge everyone style that helped build his audience in the first place. Others think the current direction is here to stay and reflects a permanent shift in the show's identity. The disagreement around that question has become almost as big as the controversies themselves.